Okay. Okay. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that we are all here. This is the full moon report for the full moon lunar eclipse that is happening at 12:45 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on July 5th, 2020. So that would be 9:45 p.m. On July 4th on Western Standard Time, Pacific Standard Time. So we're going to talk we're going to talk a lot about the US natal chart, how it is connected with the full moon lunar eclipse that is happening on the solar return of the US. And we're going to look at the rest of the we're going to look at the rest of the lunar month and what that might look like as we move through this really powerful time. This full moon lunar eclipse is no joke. This is the last of a series of incredibly powerful eclipses that started on June 5th with the moon and sun in opposition to each other in Gemini and Sagittarius. And so now we are at the opposition of Cancer and Capricorn, which is where the moon is right now. So we'll also talk about the moon transits right now and going through today on the 4th, and then moving into the 5th, the full moon lunar eclipse, and then the major transits moving through the rest of the lunar month, which will turn over when the sun and the moon come together at 28 degrees Cancer for the next lunar cycle. And then soon after that, we're going to be in Leo season, and that's going to be really, that's game on at that point. Game on. Right now we're still in the lead up, and there is an important moment that this eclipse really represents that is a portal that we can how we choose to interact with it is really up to each of us personally, but it is still here either way. And what we do with this moment is really going to impact the way that we each individually express ourselves and our own sovereignty as we move through the Leo season. So we'll have Mercury moving direct on the 12th, coming out of shadow on the 27th, the same day as Venus coming out of her shadow, and that is very connected to the natal chart of the US, and so many other aspects that are very much linked. This is a very important time. In some ways, we are doing it. This is like the second American Revolution with a Pluto return and an incredible reckoning in the second house of the United States natal chart. So what is the second house? What do we own? The land that we have, our bodies, the actual material essence that makes up the life around us. That is where Pluto is returning for the United States. And I'm going to talk a lot about what that all means and where this reckoning is happening and how we can reconcile that as well, because the chart of the US is so full of promise and potential and really creating a container for actual liberty and freedom. And there are aspects that are karmic that are meant to be played out through the course of this nation's history so far. And we will also see that in the chart, and how we move forward is really, like I said, it's like a second American Revolution. Obviously, we go through we have this holiday every single year, and it has different meaning every single time. But right now, the way things are lined up, it is very reminiscent of going back, not so much going back, but reckoning with some of the inherently flawed things that had been part of this nation's beginning, and going back and having an opportunity to reconcile that and to let go of what doesn't serve us anymore, and to not let the basis that the country was founded on to be totally lost because of fallible systems that also came along with it. And it's so much in the chart that it'll make a lot more sense as we explain the symbolism and how they're all related to each other. So let's get into the chart, mostly so I don't keep bouncing the camera around too much. And we shall look at, this is the US chart right here. So, all right, let's see here. We're going to first remark on the fact that this looks like a vessel, right? It looks like a cup. That's what it looks like. And look at all of the energy in Cancer. So we have the sun at 14 degrees Cancer. We have Jupiter at 6 degrees Cancer, which is Jupiter's exalted. We have Venus at 4 degrees Cancer. So Jupiter and Venus, the two benefics, these two planets that represent expansion and, well, Jupiter, optimism, good fortune, expansion, leadership, and then Venus, the divine feminine incarnate, right? What do we value? What is beautiful? What do we love? Right? What appeals to our senses? That's all Venus. It's very much about the experience on Earth, in on the material plane, as well as being the ruler of Libra, which is the 10th house of the United States. Now, the 10th house, or the MC, is the career. It is the house of what gives you external power because of what you've actually built. And look here, there's Saturn in the US natal chart in Libra in the 10th house, 15 degrees of Libra, circular paths. Saturn is the karmic responsibility in your lifetime. When you have Saturn in the natal chart, what the resonance and the house that it's in shows you what your responsibility is going to be in your life. And that is why every time you have a Saturn return, it is a major turning point or shift point into a new reality, because you come back around to this theme that you cannot escape from, and that will continue to give you opportunities to really mature, right? Because Saturn is about maturity and is about, it's very paternal and very structured, but it's also karma, and it's also material reality. You know, it's the wall of karma in some ways. And so to have it in Libra in the 10th house for the US, circular paths, it is the idea that the United States was going to come back around. And there are things in the 9/11 chart that I may or may not get into in this particular broadcast. I might save that for a different time, that are also very much lined up in a very significant way with the US natal chart. But for today, we're talking about the Independence Day and the 4th of July. So anyway, Sun in Cancer, Mercury is also in Cancer, but retrograde in the 8th house as well. So certainly this degree especially is very interesting, because it's about being endowed with a superior power. And we're talking about Mercury here, so we're talking about in the mind, and it's retrograde, and it's in the 8th house. There's certainly, this is the way, and this is going to be a generalized theme here, and I'm going to explain how all of these things relate to this. Here's all this energy, this really benefic, beautiful, expansive. Mars is even in Gemini in the 7th house of the US. The 7th house is about partnerships and contracts. There is certainly, when the Declaration of Independence was signed, because this chart is based on, actually, I'm going to show you real quick. Hopefully we're still recording. Yes, this chart is based on a Sag rising, and there are a lot of theories about what the rising sign is of the US, even if it's on the right date, because on July 2nd, Congress passed the resolution declaring independence from Great Britain, and then it was on July 4th according to this particular theory of the rising sign, the time. Look at this, 1710, 5:10 p.m. in Philadelphia, which is pretty much what just happened right now. So the exact timing of the United States solar return is right this moment, if we are using the Sag rising chart, which says that everybody signed at 5 o'clock. It's to 5:10. At 5:10, it was the last one. But July 2nd was when Congress passed the resolution declaring independence from Great Britain. And on the 2nd was actually a full moon, just like we have now, except not exactly the same degrees, but pretty close. It would be 11 degrees Cancer, 11 degrees Capricorn for the moon, which is where we're having this full moon lunar eclipse at the Capricorn Cancer axis, and it's at 13 to 14 degrees. So we'll talk about that too. So I just wanted to show you that there's a lot of debate, and I'll link this if you're curious of looking at the whole thing. I just want you to know we're using the Sag rising chart based on the idea that on July 4th by 5 o'clock p.m. on the East Coast, they had finally signed the Declaration of Independence. Okay, let's go back to the chart. That's not it. There you go. All right. So there's so much potential here. Seventh house, partnerships and contracts. Cancer is about the mother and the womb and the it's very tribal in a way because it's about the land and the ancestors and the vessel, right? We talk the vessel, the holy grail, the vessel, the containment for our emotional security and confidence and rootedness. Cancer is the nadir, the fourth degree, the fourth house cusp of the IC, which is in Aries for the US, which is interesting. That degree actually is 2 degrees. Aries is a comedian entertaining. So the US, I am getting ahead of myself here, but the US, the point of its ability to have personal power as a nation has to do with its ability to be objective about all of our failings, right? And this is where Mars is right now, and Chiron is here right now, and you don't see it on this chart, but Chiron is also in Aries on the US chart. So there's going to be another Chiron return. In not too distant future. It's going to 21 degrees Aries, which is the boxer entering the ring. So there's a lot of aggression. There's also a lot of aggression in this chart, specifically where Uranus is. And also there's another point, the sixth house as well, the cusp of the sixth house, which is late Taurus. There's a lot of aggression and conquest energy also that goes along with this chart. And that's where you know the reckoning is eventually going to come, not to mention the fact that Pluto return over here in Capricorn, so we'll get there. But the contract and the optimism and the Venus, you know, love and like value, and even Mars in late Gemini, which is the degree that Venus is going to come out of shadow on the 27th, and is also when Mercury comes out of its shadow from its retrograde, both on the 27th. Venus will match Mars in the US 7th house. This is beautiful, beautiful. Dancing couples at a harvest festival, you know, enjoying the wholesome organic process of duality coming together, dancing, right? At a harvest festival, you know, so it's about growth and reaping what you know, reaping and cultivating what you grow. So when Venus, the divine feminine, and then you have the divine masculine with Mars, she's gonna come together with the Mars of the natal US chart on that day. And I feel like the end of July, we're gonna see some real coming together. And Mercury is also in Cancer and is very close now to where Jupiter, the natal Jupiter, and will also come very close to, I do believe Mercury will station direct on top of the US Jupiter. So pay attention to that too, because that's this mental perspective about, you know, what do we know? What is the information? How do we communicate? You know, travel too. Mercury is short-term travel. We're talking about Cancer. We're talking about the home where we feel safe, you know, our land of origin. And he's going to go retro. The planet Mercury is going to go direct on Jupiter on the 12th, which is not that far away. And so what is this degree of Jupiter? 6 degrees Cancer, where Jupiter is exalted, by the way. Oh, the birds feathering the nest. Again, there's so much symbolism here and so much there's a lot of potential. The ideas and the partnership and the contract to be this, to hold this space, this motherly space, is very obvious in this chart, okay? And so then you have the node, the North Node, and Mercury retrograde in Cancer in the 8th house, which is the power dynamics, shared resources. I think there was, now this is where it starts to get interesting, because even though all of this good energy, and you have Mars, it's really like courageous, the warrior, is in this realm. Once you start to get to here, when in the 8th house, where you have to start dealing with reality, you know what I mean? The reality of shared resources, endowed with it, it's like this Pentecostal experience where the person, the willful man, the willful human, in their mind steps aside in order to get like start channeling essentially, or just be inspired in some way by spirit. And in this eighth house and having it retrograde, it's just it feels like it was not a good time. And I believe that it just went retrograde on the 2 days prior when Congress had voted to separate from Great Britain, was on Mercury retrograde the day. So, I mean, and the same as a full moon. So it in the same degrees as the full moon is on this Independence Day. So you can start to see, you know, how this big cycle is coming back around, and how also this idea of like, yeah, the partnership and contract is all great, but when it comes to the actual experience of sharing resources, which is where we really need to start addressing, and it is being addressed in some ways, but there is a lot of Gemini energy happening around this, which is the essence of that is the descendant of the US, is Gemini. It is about the experience of thought and the experience of communicating ideas and the experience of having this duality and opposition be the essence of how we create. But then you have to deal with the actual darkness and the emotional impact of those things when you get to the eighth house. And I think with Mercury retrograde, it was not a good idea. And I think that it's not that it wasn't a good idea, but it forced, you know, it's forcing us now and always, you know, this resonance stays with the US natal chart no matter what. This is just what it is. And it's forcing an overtone of a mental energy and ideas about the basis of power, right? The darkness, the dark night of the soul, but it's really about power. It feels to me it's about power and resources, and shared resources. At this time we had to share with the land, with the indigenous people, which is directly connected to Pluto in the look at this, they're opposed each other. So when it came to shared resources, Mercury was retrograde and wasn't really, it was, how do I say this? There certainly was an endowment, right? But we didn't get the full picture at the time because Mercury was retrograde. Now, keep in mind, the North Node is also in the eighth house. This is the karmic destiny of the United States in Leo, in the eighth house. Okay, so it's really about finding some sovereignty within this context of shared power and resources, which is, you know, where we're heading right now. And you can really see that now. Mercury is opposed Pluto directly, and when we get back around to this, I'm going to talk about Pluto and the second house, because it describes very clearly what this reckoning is going to be about, which is about coming to terms with the initial theft of this land from the indigenous people, and it has to be rectified. It has to be acknowledged and truly forgiven, and there has to be real redemption around this in order for the US to fulfill her destiny, right? Definitely, because it is about finding personal sovereignty within the context of power dynamics, because power doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists in partnership and relationship. And we, this country is meant to, the head of its dragon is in the realm of the sovereign being Leo, right? The sun within which is naturally square to Scorpio, by the way. Leo is fixed fire, Scorpio is fixed water. The rules the eighth house. These are squared energies. So it's just something to keep in mind that there's a lot of intense passion with a Leo eighth house, and you have the North Node there. So Mercury, we got Venus, we got Mars, now we got Jupiter, and now we got Saturn, right? 15 degrees of Libra in the 10th house, the karmic responsibility of the United States, circular paths, right? That this is the cycles, there are rhythms to the natural world And we're talking about Libra, so we're talking about the balance of relationship, aesthetically balanced. She ruled by Venus. This is about our relationships being balanced, the scales of the harvest being balanced. This is about symmetry and everybody in fairness, right? Libra is about fairness. And so 15 degrees of Libra, circular paths, and it's the idea that we're coming back around. The United States has to come back around and address that there are patterns and rhythms that if we fall into this transpersonal pattern, then we can really just ride the current. Or we could just be really bored because it doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. But I really feel like that what this means with Saturn is that the US was destined from the beginning to come back around and heal something and to acknowledge this that it's part of a cycle and a circular path that has already played out in other civilizations and in historical time periods as well. So here's Saturn in directly square to the sun. Here's the other thing. Again, the sun is at fixed star Sirius, 14 degrees Cancer. This is the wise old man archetype, permanence in the truth, which is how you know that the destiny of the United States, there's so much potential here. And you have Uranus in the 6th house in Gemini. I mean, this is certainly, the 6th house is the get your shit together house. It is of hidden enemies. It is when you have crisis. It is all the things that really test you and what you're made of. And if you are able to take everything you've learned about yourself so far and really make yourself into the best version of yourself. And the Uranus is the awakening. Now, something else to keep in mind is that the ascendant is in Sagittarius, right? 13 degrees Sagittarius. A widow's past is brought to light. Ouch. This is where Pluto was on the day of the 9/11 attacks, was on the US ascendant directly, right? Total destruction of the baseline personality of the United States. And what does that even say to you? That says that the United States, the baseline of who the United States is, as all of this is, all of these cycles play out over and over again. The essence of it is bringing up not being able to hide from the past. And so Pluto just destroys that with 9/11 because it forced our awareness of the deep state and the cabal right up to the surface. And it's taken a long time for people to accept that that's what happened. But Pluto and Saturn was on the US descendant as well in Gemini at the same time, right? So Pluto, you had a Pluto Saturn opposition, Pluto on top of the ascendant of the US, destroying the very essence of what the US stands for, and the foundation for which everything is built on, and then in opposition to Saturn, which is on the descendant as well. This, I mean, you can see that's why a lot of people really connect to this chart as the right chart in terms of the rising sign for the US. But there's a lot of different opinions, and it's just worth looking at it. This is just the one that I'm going to use because it makes the most sense to have Pluto here and Saturn here on the day that the Twin Towers are destroyed. It makes a lot of sense. So we have Saturn, and I just talked about Uranus in late Gemini. Well, not late Gemini, sorry, early Gemini, like 8 degrees Gemini, as well, in this zone of, oh shit, and Uranus is the awakening, right? Now, let's talk about the moon, because the moon is in Aquarius on July 4th, 1776 at 5:10 p.m. Had they drafted and signed the declaration 2 days prior, it would have been on a full moon with the moon in Capricorn, probably still in the first house, and the sun at like 11 or 12 degrees. So the moon is in late Aquarius, which is just, it's so perfect because this is talking about the emotional the emotional, personal experience, the, you know, the intuitive part of the United States, the emotional part of the United States, you know, and the United States is a Cancer. And so the moon is the ruler of the United States. It's so wonderful. And 27 to 28 degrees Aquarius is, you know, really, really honing in on like, you know, what it means to live as part of the collective and have it function. And since we are moving into the age of Aquarius, it makes a lot of sense that the, you know, the soul, you know, the intuitive divine feminine aspect of the US as an entity is in this late Aquarian degree in the third house. So it's about the mind, what we know, the information, the way we conceptualize reality, and the way that the US emotionally conceptualizes reality. The filter, especially this degree, is like planning, using the natural world and planning ahead. It's like cutting down trees and splitting firewood for the winter, essentially. It's Aquarius is using its intellect and its ability to do things and to see ahead, right? Aquarius is also future oriented. And so it's about planning ahead. It's about using the natural world. It's about living as a responsible collective when you're talking about Aquarius. And this is where the moon is. Aquarius is also very revolutionary. And so the moon, the emotional experience, is definitely in this revolutionary sign in the third house, which is about the mind and what you know and the information and how you communicate it. So and you know, there was an intention there when it was signed, I think, to have this moon in Aquarius and not in Pisces. I think that would have just been a little bit too much, especially with all this Cancer energy. All right. So where are we here? We had Uranus. Getting your shit. Uranus in Gemini. Trump has his Uranus in Gemini conjunct his sun and his North Node in the 11th house, 10th house. I can't remember exactly. Let's look at it because I have it right here. Because I thought maybe, yeah, here we go. See, look, Sun, Uranus, North Node, all in Gemini in the 10th house. Fun fact, 24 to 25 degrees of Taurus, where Trump's MC is a Pleiadian star marking. And what is your MC? It's your career. It is what you're here to build for the sake of the collective. It is what gives you, and look at all of this. The Sun, his North Node, and Uranus, the Great Awakener, right? He is the sacred clown, and that is his job, his mission in life. And the cusp of his MC is the Pleiades. It's the beginning of the Pleiades. It's a Pleiadian star marking. I love it. I love it. It's just, I mean, if it wasn't for astrology, who knows where I'd be. So Neptune, here we go. Let's talk about Neptune. Oh yeah, we did talk about Saturn is opposed the sun, or squaring the sun. So the sun has these like really sweet and consolidating and very protective boundary, you know, of this mother energy in the 7th house, but it's square to Saturn, which is just like, we're going to have to come back around to the same place, and there's no way we're getting out of it. In fact, it is our mission, the United States' mission, in order to do that. And where's the MC for the US? It's 2 degrees Libra. What is that? Let's look it up, because it's probably significant, right? 2 degrees Libra. I already looked it up, but this stuff leaves as soon as it comes in. The transmutation of the fruits. The transmutation of the fruits of past experiences into the seed realizations of the forever creative spirit. A repolarization of inner energies leading to a creative centralization of consciousness. Are you starting to see here about how much the United States was put into place when it was, in order to fulfill all of these aspects, especially here, its mission. And Saturn is here to really bring it into form. In fact, it's saying you can't get around this. This is just what's going to happen. Things will come back around, and this is a cycle that has been happening over and over. And so you can like get into the current of it in order to feel balanced about it. and things are coming back around. You can also see that it is in this trine to Uranus as well, right? This degree that Uranus is in, a quiver filled with arrows. This is one of those aggressive tendency degrees, but it's the quiver filled with the arrows. It's not the arrow being shot or anything like that. It's just, it's all of these ideas, right, are at the ready to be taken out and projected towards a target of some sort. And with Uranus, we're talking about the higher octave of Mercury. We're talking about the collective third eye, the awakening, you know, the flash of inspiration, the lightning bolt. And we have to, you know, the awakening process for the United States is being ready to have the information that we continue to collect, I think, and to have it already in order to, there is a sense of conquest in, with this degree, but you can think about it as conquest of the ego itself. So it's more like of a Zen thing, which I feel like aligns much more with this, because we need to wake up to that as a country in order to then move to the top of the chart, which is pretty much where most of, you know, the big stuff is. There's only the moon and Pluto, which are connected to each other, and then Uranus is right on the cusp of the descendant, which is everything about the US is really about, for the most part, is about the collective and our relationship with it, especially the partnership, right? Seventh house. Neptune, right now, this Neptune is in Virgo. This Neptune is also sextile Mercury, right? So we have late Cancer, Mercury in the 8th house. There is a taming that needs to happen. Virgo is very controlled and disciplined. Neptune in Virgo is in detriment because it's in the sign that is opposite its rulership, which is Pisces. That's where Neptune is now, is pretty much opposed to the US natal Neptune. And this is really about taming the energies, taming the beast, taming the passion, right? The lion tamer. Resoluteness and patience is what this is. And this is in the realm of higher education, foreign travel, philosophy, religion, dogma, belief. You know, this is like spiritual teacher here in Neptune in your 9th house, spiritual teacher. But is really being challenged by Neptune right now, who is, you know, opposite of that in home sign, which is really, there is no taming of anything. It's just, you just dissolve into it all. And you are completely tapped into the collective unconscious and trying to, and trusting and surrendering to that process. Whereas Neptune here is at not in full power and in fact in detriment, because there is, you know, trying to tame oneself doesn't even make sense in the realm of formless, boundaryless vibrational frequency. There is no self at this point. And so, but we do need the spiritual leadership, especially in the 9th house of our belief systems, because we do need to experience some patience and some taming of the passions in some ways, especially because our North Node is in Leo. And so there's a lot of passion here. The opposition, we can, you know, it's going to be here for a while because Neptune's retrograde and then is going to go back. And so this opposition is still pretty strong and will be for a while. And so the patience, finding the fulcrum, the balance point between those two spaces with Neptune is really important, because there's nothing to ground onto. And this, I think this can really help the Neptune, the natal Neptune of the US. And then we go to Pluto. So this is a big deal. Okay, Pluto retrograde, 27, 28 degrees Capricorn. All right, so that means, so now we're going to start looking at the chart for now. And this will be a good segue because, because this is where the reckoning comes from. And this is something that we have to be mindful, because we don't need, there is a reckoning, absolutely. But we don't need to necessarily give up on all of the potential of the US, because there's a faction right now that hates this country and is really resentful. And there is, and it's not that it's not based on real valid reasons. It's written right here in the chart about ownership, and what the US owns, what it identifies as its own, and that's where the reckoning is coming from. And you can really see here how it's in opposition to the Mercury retrograde in late Cancer in the 8th house, which is just like, um, I need to. There's an endowment here. It's like the Declaration of Independence about how we're all endowed with certain inalienable rights. That is this right here, as a personal experience. But we have to rectify what this opposition means, which is Pluto in Capricorn is that what do we own as a country? We have to we have to reckon with that, because we do not own any of this land. And in fact, the country, when it started, besides the principles it was started on, but what it actually claimed as its own, has to be reckoned with. And it is, and that's, we're still going towards that. And there are so many steps that need to be taken in order for that to happen. And just remember, Pluto is also retrograde now and is going back this way. And so it's still going to cut, it's also very close to this. It's within 5 degrees. And so it's conjunct. And it'll just get stronger because Pluto's going to go direct and then have a official, but it won't be retrograde this time. So that is going to be a really powerful moment where that reckoning will be complete. And maybe we can look further into the future and see exactly when that's happening. The degree that the second degree is, or the cusp of the second house is 18 degrees of Capricorn. This is really important because it's very close also to where this full moon lunar eclipse is. It's within 5 degrees of this cusp. And I think the attention needs to be brought to it because it's amazing. It says the Union Jack flag flies from a British warship. Now, why does that seem so, I don't know. The protection afforded to individuals and groups by powerful institutions in charge of maintaining order. Political power. It says this power can easily be misused under the pretext of preserving law and order. That is certainly what the British and many of the colonists actually supported the British because of that. They wanted them to secure law and order for the colonies, and they weren't supporting the revolutionaries necessarily at first. It was not a popular idea initially. Justice and compassion must balance social power, and especially the power of privileged groups. Okay, so the second house, what this country owns, what it has is this at its disposal, right? It's about political power. And it's about making a separation from Britain, I think. But the reckoning is with the Pluto retrograde. It's completely rewriting the code for this whole 3D matrix, well, and especially for the United States, which is why when it comes exact and it's direct, it's going to complete this reckoning. Like, it'll be fully there, and it's just leading up to it right now. So, and you can see here that it's, it's trine as well to Neptune in the 9th house in Virgo, which is patience, taming the beast, and showing your skill to tame the beast. It takes some skill and some discipline to do that. And that's where Neptune is. And it's not really supported, but it's at least something in the 9th house, and is trine. Again, trine to Pluto. We do have to be patient. And if we were able to tame our beast in some ways, we might not be in this situation. There was, it's a huge land grab and the whole manifest destiny and all that. And in order for the US to truly heal, we have to come to terms with this, and we don't have to push it. It's naturally happening. right? That's the whole thing about astrology. It just shows you how we're going through all these cycles and how they are in fact cycles, and that you can work with it. And here's one thing I want to share back from this website. And I'm, like I said, I'm going to share the link, but you have to see it because it's with Benjamin Franklin talking about astrology. Um, Astrology is one of the most ancient sciences, held in high esteem of old by the wise and the great. Formerly, no prince would make war or peace, nor any general fight in battle. In short, no important affair was undertaken without first consulting an astrologer. Okay, so they knew what they were doing when they were going to sign the declaration. They knew that the sun was going to be conjunct Sirius. They knew that if they waited and for the full moon to pass, that they would not be condemning. And it's not even the full moon, but then Mercury went retrograde on the 2nd as well. That's where, so the independence from Britain had a shadow cast, right? Absolutely. But the declaration was signed with different energy in play. And so in some ways it helped salvage what otherwise may have just like doomed the US from the very beginning, especially with this Pluto retrograde in Capricorn. The reckoning was bound to happen no matter what. But when the declaration was signed, Mercury was, it was a lot closer to an opposition to Pluto earlier. So, so that's the US chart. So let's look at what's going on right now. And this is the 4th of July. And we're going to look at the 4th and the full moon, and then I'm going to go over the rest of the lunar cycle. So, but I just want to show you how important the US in terms of what it represents. And there's so much more to this that I could talk about, and I could do research for the rest of my life. But where things are right now with this eclipse happening right in opposition to the natal sun of the US, it's like if you were going to do any kind of dark magic, which is I'm sure is happening, in order to sabotage the contracts of the United States and what it stood for, that it's definitely happening. So it's also really important that we're, putting as much light out as possible to counter that, because we don't need to lose the message with the messengers, which is one of the biggest arguments I see right now, and how certain factions are able to convince people to destroy the historical perspective, or that you can't, you know what I mean? Like, you can't go back and erase this. And we have to deal with why all of the aspects, good, bad, challenging, and helpful, are part of this natal chart as we move forward, instead of destroying it, because the contract for the United States is very ordained. And it's not even so much that the US is just great. It's meant to clear the karma of past civilizations and their mistakes, like Atlantis, and especially with the Syrians. The Syrians were a big part of Atlantis, and then the Lemurians went under Shasta, right? And the Atlanteans went to Egypt, and the Syrians, they went to Egypt. And then you see the Masons come from Egypt, and the forefathers of this country were Masons. And that's a whole other thing. So that's for another time. It's just, you have the continuity of all of this, and how important the United States is in terms of a contract for the next new age. It's substantial, and it's not without its challenges. Like I said, there is a reckoning coming, and the US absolutely has to face that head on with courage. And that's what this full moon lunar eclipse is really going to allow. And actually, leading up to this point has really been some training ground, especially with the Schumann. It is, we are upgrading constantly, and she is modulating this ascension process for us. And that's, every time it like spikes really high, you can feel it, and you can see it in people's actions and in their words and their temperament. And all of us, it's not just outside of us, but we're all feeling it together. But because we can't take all of the wounds, we can't take the victimhood identities, we can't take all of this stuff in with us if we want to successfully face this moment of reckoning, because it is coming regardless. And part of what we're seeing right now out in the world, especially with child trafficking rings going down, that's a big part of it, because it kind of just shows how dark it's really been. And those types of activities, which are all about power and addiction, they come from the same place as people who had no problem slaughtering and stealing the land of the indigenous people, or slavery, right? And not everybody, you know what I mean? Just because these systems existed does not mean that everybody that's within them agrees with them. But we all feel trapped by the system, and it takes real time in order to make these changes. But we are very supported right now, and 2020 is the year that things really shift. So here's us right now. Let's see. I will. Oh my gosh. I'll reload the page. Looks like I am still recording. Sometimes that happens. Okay, so today, what happened? Today, the moon is in Capricorn. It squared Mars early on, 4 degrees Capricorn, which is a party outfitting a canoe to journey, right? This is when you get to Capricorn. This is the 4th act of the zodiac. Capitalization, right? Capitalization is really as simple as you invest plus your work equals profit. Capitalization. And it's very simple. And so by the time you get to Capricorn, your investment plus your work gives you something more than what you had, right? The investment of the work. So Capricorn, first half, crystallization, which is where the moon is still right now, and early crystallizing. With the moon in Capricorn, you know, we're getting really serious about, you know, how we feel, the path up the mountain, squaring Mars in Aries in the 4th house. So what we're going to do is we're going to start tracking all of these things through the natal chart, just like I would do in a reading. So the moon is now has been moving through the U.S. first house, the subjective self, and is, let's see here, 4 degrees of Aries. So Mars is here, so squaring, right? So the moon is subjective, personal experience, squaring Mars, which is in the 4th house of you know, for a sun and, you know, all this Cancer energy, the 4th house is a big deal in this chart. This is where personal power, this is where the U.S. feels powerful, like as an entity. And it's in Aries. It's about the potential for creation. So Mars is here at home, squaring the moon. And Mars is still in the very beginning of this potential energy. And so it's really trying to get a handle on the aspect of duality that's within the seed, not being expressed yet. So it's just still in the early stages, whereas the moon is like, yeah, let's get ready to like get this group performance going. Like we got to get all of the things built and all of the structures in place, you know, outfit the canoe for the journey type of thing. And so, but with Mars, it's just like, no, just slow up. I need to go within for just a little bit and like work on what this dualistic experience even means. And the moon is like, well, we're way past that. Like we are just moving along here, building things. So that's going through the 1st and the 4th house. Next, the moon is also going to, which already happened as well, was opposite of Mercury, retrograde. And let's see here. I have it all written down, these transits. Here we go. Yep. And quincunx Venus, moon opposite Mercury. In a sunlit home, domesticated birds sing joyously. Oh, And then, so there's a lot of animal imagery here. A group of rabbits dressed in human clothes walk as if on parade. So in Capricorn, where the moon is, there is an acceptance of where one is and a total comfortability with that. Whereas in Cancer, where Mercury is, it's there's a certain amount of imitation. You know, it's like the shift from, it's like animal, not animal, but like pure emotion and almost instinct is starting to like walk up, or hey, you know what I mean? I think, and this is just, you know, like I said, this is just today. And so the moon is moving through this place, still in the first house, 8 degrees Cancer. It's, you know, pretty close to Jupiter. So the moon is also in opposition to the US, Venus, and Jupiter. So, I mean, it's very serious. It's very emotionally serious and very like grounded and very like paternal and, you know, very linear focus. And, you know, it's the mountain goat sending up the mountain, you know, it's just like blinders on. We're getting down to brass tacks here, emotionally, right? Which is not a terrible thing, but it's in opposition to all of this US natal energy with Jupiter and the sun, and eventually with the full moon, or Jupiter and Venus, and then with the full moon, it's going to be opposed to the sun. All in the first house of the US, which is just like who I am is like is a master, and I'm holding all the wisdom, and now we're going to get really serious about what we're going to get really serious emotionally on the inside about, you know, how we feel, who we are. And then when you move into the second house in Capricorn, it's going to be about, so what is it that I own? You know, what does the US own? What is at the US's disposal? And it's stolen. So, and it didn't have to be, but that's where we get lost with the message versus the messenger, is that we consistently as a country continue to disrespect the people who are already here. And that's the reckoning, I feel like. That's definitely the reckoning. The moon is also going to square Chiron today, also in the fourth house of the US. So 10 degrees Capricorn is going to square Chiron. And we also want to, there's a certain amount of trust, an albatross feeding from the hand of a sailor, like the natural, you know, the natural world having a symbiotic relationship with humans, and that there's trust there, because we're moving into the second decan of Capricorn at this point. So, which is the three of discs, Capricorn decan 2, the three of discs, the works card. Because we have to trust, and we have to form a bond or relationship with that can provide us with sustenance in some ways. The squaring Chiron is just like the wound. So that's going to be that's uncomfortable as well, because we still want to hang on to this woundedness, this wounded healer, and this victim mentality, especially when it comes around to the traditional images. We keep getting triggered by the images, which is why people want to tear them down. And not seeing that they can represent something different. In fact, we're giving this opportunity to see them as something different. And emotionally, we want to feel, you know, personally, we just feel, you know, we just want to get past that. We're just like, we can trust each other, and we can build a bond that will allow something better, or more so, to grow. These two factions can come together. You know, the bird and albatross feeding from the hand of a sailor. So somebody that, you know, spends their life and their job or whatever on the ocean. And so there is this connection to the ocean here, and the emotional and the unconscious, and the sailor being the steward in some ways of that, having this connection with the animal spiritual nature. And there can be a bond and a trust there, but only if we're willing to let go of the images that continue to trigger us. We can move beyond that, because there is a teacher giving new symbolic images and or forms to these images, if we choose to step out of our role as victim, but only if we're able to do that. So, and then the moon trines Uranus, 10 degrees at this, and the same thing, the moon is squaring Chiron, but it's also trining Uranus, and trine Uranus at 10 degrees Taurus is the Red Cross nurse, the compassionate linking of all humanity. And so, wow, isn't this an incredible moment to have this squaring Chiron, but at the same time trying Uranus, the path of the awakening that is like, hey, we're all humans, no matter what, we're all humans. And this degree of the moon in Capricorn identifies that these different aspects of who we are, the spiritual nature can come to the sailor, you know, the explorer who rides the waves of the ocean. There can be a bond here. There can be a trust that is fostered. And it's very, very supported by Uranus and Taurus. It's wonderful. So this is, let's see here. So we'll go back. This is today, 4th of July. So we'll go to the full moon now. There we go. Here's the full moon, lunar eclipse. So what does that mean? That means the shadow of the earth is cast onto the moon. So usually the moon is full illumination and reflection by the sun on what is often subconscious. Now I want to read this degree, 14 degrees Capricorn. This is where the moon is. An ancient bas relief. It's like a, you know what a bas relief is. It's like a sculpture of a head, basically. Carved in granite. Does this sound familiar about where Trump was and Mount Rushmore? Oh my God. Remains a witness to a long forgotten culture. Now that it's not long forgotten. And I'm talking about the culture before Mount Rushmore was a thing, which I'm learning quite a bit actually about how that land was fought over before Europeans showed up, that the indigenous people were fighting amongst themselves and over that land. So that's interesting in and of itself. But anyway, the will to unearth in our culture, as well as in any culture, what has permanent value and to let go of non-essentials. I mean, I can't even spell it out any better than this. This is where the full moon is, and it's being eclipsed by the earth. We're not going to have full illumination because of what needs to go and what is permanent in terms of our culture, because the earth is casting a shadow on the moon. So it's going to be distorted. All right. It's really important that we remember this, because this makes it essential that, especially as we move forward, because this is the full moon. So the full moon's going to happen. It's going to be eclipsed. And then from there, the moon is going to keep moving. We're going into the 5th now. And it's going to start coming into a sextile with Neptune. Now, once this happens, this is like the moment. This is the moment where we get to take this opportunity with this sextile, because after this happens, this is when the moon starts to cross Jupiter and Pluto. And now Pluto has moved into the next degree behind. And that degree is a woman entering a convent. And so this is where Jupiter and Pluto are right now. Completely, here, I'll even read it because it's so good. Total commitment to a transcendent goal. Remember, we talked about the Jupiter and Pluto conjunction, right? That was like a portal opening, but like a suction portal, you know, like a like a black hole getting, this is where it is now. It is completely active. And so when we pass in front of this emotionally, when the moon passes this point, we are in a position where we can let go of what needs to go into that black hole and needs to be composted cosmically, right? And it will be about do we have a total commitment to this goal? Because if we do, we will be supported. We will be able to pass in front of this portal and let go of what that is non-essential anymore when it comes to the deep representations, right? What has the permanent value. So this degree of Capricorn, where it's sextile Neptune and Pisces is a relay race. It is, are we in it with for the long haul with each other, right? If we are able to trust that relay race, trust our feeling about it, and the sextile is with Neptune retrograde in Pisces. The sextile has to do with taking the opportunity to expand on or to trust, full trust and surrender. We're talking about Neptune and Pisces, full surrender to the path, to all of it, with nothing more than a naive trust, right? And then if we're able to do that, then we can get we will emotionally be able to see this as a relay race, because it's not just about us, right? Neptune is about all the generations before, all the generations that will come after us too. This is not just about us. This is about the long haul for generations to come. And so this sextile is just, it gives us this moment to figure this out and to make the most of it, because then, like I said, the moon is going to cross Jupiter and Pluto, and then is going to cross Saturn. And this is all sitting on top of the United States Pluto, okay? It's all in here, right? Which is the reckoning. And all of this energy that's been in Capricorn with the Saturn Pluto conjunction, and with Jupiter and Pluto conjuncting now twice this year, and they're all retrograde, and Pallas Athena is in here, strategy and wisdom, all in late Capricorn like this on top of the US Pluto. This, what is happening, this whole breakdown of society and our culture and the economies is all part of the reckoning for the United States. And if we can see that for what it is, then when the moon passes in front of this, we can identify it, we can emotionally connect to it, but we will not get sucked into the void of all of that, because it's a dark space. There's no doubt about it. Capricorn is the devil, right? It is the illusion that material reality is all there is, and it's constantly being, just stripped away layer by layer. And now Jupiter, is just, it's really intense. And so the eclipse, it's a challenge. We have to be very mindful that we are not going to get a full reflection, and that we better get our intuition really dialed in so that we do not get sucked into the wrong timeline. And that's the 5th, moving past the full moon lunar eclipse into and then into a moon in Aquarius. So we can do that. We can go through that process. Get the moon in Aquarius, because I think that happens on the 6th, the Monday the 6th. Yep, here we go. Yep. The moon is with Saturn. Now, something to keep in mind, that 7/7 seems to be coming up as a big day, and I've heard it from different people in different contexts. So I think we're also being prepared so that when we get to this time where the moon is in Aquarius, which is also where the moon was for the US natal chart, and now the moon will be moving through the 2nd house of the US, which is again about ownership, about value, about what has value, the actual land itself. We're going to start identifying with that energy as well, personally and emotionally. So, and we're going through the 2nd house of value. And so when we're going to talk about Nasara and Jasara and anchoring that in on the 7th, it's very much tied to this 2nd house with the US and the Pluto return. Okay, so I think the last part we're going to look at for now is the 2nd half of this lunar cycle, which begins with the full moon lunar eclipse. So we're going to look at the moon in Aquarius, the 6th and the 7th, right? And there are obviously moon transits. I do all this stuff on the daily, so this is just the big stuff as we go through the rest of the lunar cycle. The big thing was the chart for the US and the full moon lunar eclipse, and how that relates and how incredibly important it is. Okay, so the moon's in Aquarius, and then for the 6th and the 7th. So the next big transit is going to be the moon trines the north node in the last degree of Aquarius. So which is also conjunct with the moon, or the US moon. So the US moon is conjunct with the current north node of the world. So the collective destiny of the world is very much tied to, right now at least, to the United States lunar position in the third house, right? And the third house is the Gemini house. So it's a lot about the mind. It's a lot about information. And Mercury is the magician, right? It is the logos. It is the thoughts that create things, right? It is real magic, is spells. That is definitely third house. And it's how we understand, you know, perceive reality as well. So the next big one, like I said, the 8th. Let's see here, the 8th. So we had that. The moon was going to trine the north node at the last degree. And the last degree of Aquarius is, you know, the chrysalis, right? Let me see. It's like some really long Sabian symbol that I probably deeply rooted in the past of a very ancient culture, a spiritual brotherhood in which many individual minds are merged into the glowing light of a unanimous consciousness is revealed to one who has emerged successfully from his metamorphosis. Okay, so that's pretty cool to have trining the north node right now. That's going to be happening on the 8th. And then Mercury in Cancer is squaring Mars in Aries at 7 degrees. So, and Mercury is still retrograde at this point. And, you know, thoughts of home, the way we communicate with family, the way, the ideas about where our land and where we come from, especially when we're going to, I mean, we have Mercury in Cancer in the US natal chart. So it's also considering all that stuff too. Squaring Mars, who's still in Aries, is just like, I am all about the potential. That is a cardinal fire. I am here to enact and to activate. That's it. And Mars is just going through that and is not really paying attention or cares to pay attention to what Mercury has to say about home or safety or any of those things. Mars is just like, I don't have time for that. I'm on the mission now, right? I'm on the war path. So, and as Mars keeps moving through Aries, he's gonna get stronger and stronger and stronger. Okay, which is the 4th house of the U.S. Personal power. The moon is in Pisces at this point, and then the next big one is the moon in Pisces. Venus will sextile Chiron at 10 degrees of Gemini and Aries. And let's see here, that's on the 10th. Yeah, there we go. And that means she's also going to have some sort of relationship with Uranus, but this is a sextile. So 10 degrees of Gemini, let's look at that. 10 degrees of Gemini. You know, oh, look at that, an airplane performing a nosedive. So a superior ability to challenge nature and play with danger. The lion tamer kind of came up here too, but it's not like that at all. It's just like, let's go for it. And Venus, you know, she's all about what feels good, and she's only going to do it if it's valuable to her and it feels good to her, and it fulfills what she wants. So the fact that it's sextile to Chiron, we could either take a real nosedive into healing these wounds, or we could take a real nosedive into doubling down on these wounds. So, and especially relationships. Oh my gosh, there's been a lot of attacking each other. Oh Lord. And what we value in our relationships, absolutely. Let's see here. So that's on the 10th, right? And 11th, look at that. Chiron goes retrograde. In Aries, the moon moves into Aries. Now this is where it's really going to heat up. You know what I mean? The moon is going to go moon to Aries. Chiron is going to go retrograde. It's going to meet Mars at some point very soon. And then we're going to have the 3rd quarter square, which is crisis in consciousness. A moon in Aries, right? Ooh, that's a fiery temper, squaring the sun at 22 degrees Cancer. Let's see what's going on with that. And so by the time, you know, the sun is here, it's getting real close to its opposition with Jupiter and Pluto at this point. So 22 degrees of Cancer is a young woman awaiting a sailboat. The longing for transcendent happiness in the soul open to great dreams. Oh, that sounds really nice. I could see why that would square a moon in Aries, where emotionally we're just like, okay, um, 22 degrees or 22 degrees Aries is very close to the Chiron, the U.S. natal Chiron as well. So not only, oh, that's also Mercury retrograde in the natal US chart is about 22, 23, 24 degrees Cancer as well. So you can see there where there's going to be there's going to be some friction because Mercury also goes direct that day, and the Sun is going to trine. So it's going to square Aries, and then it's going to trine Neptune in Pisces as well. And so oh, that is really nice. And the square, I think there's going to be a lot of challenge, but there's also going to be an incredible amount of beautiful spiritual energy on this day too, on the 12th. So this moves us into the last week. So, which is not, we have the moon moves from Aries to Taurus. And this is where the Sun opposition to Jupiter, Mars conjuncts Chiron at this point, which is now retrograde. Oh, that's going to be fun. The 15th, the moon is still in Taurus, and then the Sun opposes Pluto. So with the moon in Taurus, this isn't so bad, even though these oppositions from the Sun to Jupiter and Pluto, when they are both on top of the Sun's natal, the U.S.'s natal Pluto. Yeah, it's not an easy. It's definitely not an easy, and that means it's going to also be conjunct with the U.S. natal Mercury. So there's going to be a lot of pushing of personal character because we're getting pretty close to Leo, which is like full expression at this point, because you feel completely confident by the time you get to Leo. So moon in Gemini. 7/17, the moon is still in Gemini. The 18th, the moon moves into Cancer. Saturn's going to quincunx the nodes. That means Saturn is going to have an inconjunct with the nodes in Capricorn to Sag and Gemini. And that's just not going to fit at all. And then the moon in Cancer, where we will have the next full moon, or new moon, 28 degrees Cancer. So the Sun and the moon will both be at 28 degrees Cancer. That's the next new moon. And then the next lunar cycle is going to be all about Leo. And it's going to be, that's where it's going to get started really heating up. And people are either going to come into their sovereign nature, or the dark side of Leo is like lust. And not lust in a good way, like lust for power, the beast not being tamed, right? Oh, that goes so much back to where natal Neptune is in the US chart in the 9th house of belief systems and philosophy. And we have to spiritually tame the beast. And coming into Leo, yeah, it's going to be, it's just going to keep getting hotter. It's just going to keep getting hotter. So I would say the biggest takeaway from this report, to be honest, I know it's a lot of information. The biggest takeaway is to remember that the full moon lunar eclipse is going to distort what would usually be a full illumination and reflection of what subconsciously needs to be released in order for us to move on. And we're talking about the things that are so entrenched in our culture that we, what is it that has value and what is not essential anymore. And we have to answer, obviously, to a certain extent for ourselves, because that's where the Sun in Cancer is about the individuation process. But emotionally, we're going to be thinking about the entire collective. And this has a lot to do with so many themes that are popping up in terms of what is literally carved into stone or carved into some sort of physical form, that what's essential and what isn't. And remember, transient. The moon is transient. It is a representation of our own internal waters. And so it's always shifting, and it's rhythmic, and it's moving. And even though we might have this moment of just like, oh, I see now, it might not be, it's going to be distorted because of the eclipse. And this is going to play itself out over the next 6 months. So that has to be really, um, you have to consider that, especially if you have a very strong position right now about these kinds of things, because as the moon moves through Capricorn, it's going to shift. And so this time period from the eclipse and the following hours, which will be overnight on the morning of the 5th, are going to be really instrumental. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of stuff is happening in dream time, because that's going to impact how, at least most directly, the rest of this lunar cycle plays out, which started with early degrees of Cancer, where we planted our seeds of intention, which was at 0 degrees, raising the flag on the ship, like pulling down the old flag and raising the new one. That's 0 to 1 degrees of Cancer. That was where the new moon is. And so we have to be ready. We have to see what is worth keeping and what is not essential, in order for us to really fully enact and allow growth for those seeds that we planted. We have to do that, and just to keep in mind that it will be distorted with the eclipse. That's kind of what they mean, and to put as much light out there as possible. So I think that's plenty of information. If you're still with me, oh my gosh, thank you. Feedback is great. I love doing these kinds of videos. I want to do more of these types of videos. So they take a lot of work and a lot of research. So I have included a donation link to PayPal, and donations are gladly accepted. This is a labor of love. Don't get me wrong. I'm this 4th of July and I'm working. And so, but donations are gladly accepted for this work. And let me know what you think. And have a wonderful holiday. Please be safe. Take care of yourselves. And I'll see you probably on Monday for the daily medicine and the daily astrology report. Take care, everybody. Bye.